Good morning, everyone. Justin Trudeau is unable to answer another question, and my question to him is, are you running for Premier of Ontario, or are you running to be the Prime Minister? It's interesting, and the question bears answering. Here's CTV News tweeting, quote, Liberal leaders Justin Trudeau was asked about how he would work with Ontario Premier Doug Ford if he was re-elected, after attacking him throughout the campaign. Here's how he responded.
Talking about this week on a municipal handgun ban require the buy-in, the cooperation from someone like Premier Doug Ford, and yet you've spent this entire campaign so far bashing him. How can you expect him to work with you if you are re-elected?
I think the reality is I am a parent with kids in the Ontario public system, and I really wished that Doug Ford would spend as much time focusing on my kids' school as he does focusing on supporting his federal party. Canadians have a clear choice. Conservative politicians that hide their promises, don't deliver platforms that are costed, and then deliver cuts to Canadians, to the services they need, while giving tax breaks to the wealthy. The choice in Canada on October 21st is clear.
Justin Trudeau or Doug Ford. What? It's okay. It just seems really weird, right? Doesn't it seem strange how much Trudeau's campaigning against Ford? And I mean, Ford got a big majority, and sure, there's a big, scary media hate on for Doug Ford. But if an election were held today, I don't see a big difference in what the Liberal Party's offering, or the NDP, or anybody else. I don't see other big ideas on the provincial stage. I guess Justin Trudeau's looking to edge in on that. And he's talked about that with his 2 billion trees idea, which is a ridiculous idea because provinces manage forests. But the further problem here is he's very good. Did you see how he danced you away from the question? How are you going to work with Doug Ford after attacking him through this whole campaign? Well, the choice is clear on October 21st. Did you see how much the Conservatives are cutting? Which is not true. Not true. It's not true. So, isn't it interesting to watch all of this? He's very good at, rocking you away from that question and turning it into something else. And, is that what you want in a leader? I've been watching it for years. I've been watching it long enough to actually begin to really like this segment in my show, right? I was like, ooh, this is fun. I haven't done this one in a while. And I shouldn't be doing that with these politicians. I want a leader who will answer a question. There's only one who's actually answering the questions. And his name doesn't rhyme with smear. Okay, here's Brian Lilly, and he says, quote, it's a promise sure to find resonance with Canadian public. Conservative leader Andrew Scheer says he will cut foreign aid by 25% through cutting off rich countries and dictatorships. Read and retweet. And I've been talking about this as well, where our tax dollars go for funding. I usually talk about China, like the Asia Infrastructure Bank, for the millions of dollars we've been sending there, 200 million odd, or could be up to 400 million, 250. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But regardless, there's a lot of money going to other rich nations that we trade with. So that seems really odd to me. And I've been talking about it for a long time, but now Mr. Scheer is addressing it. And here's my issue with this 25% idea. And I understand that he's identifying these other countries and saying they're rich and we shouldn't, and we trade with them, and we shouldn't be sending our tax dollars to fund infrastructure or climate change, anything in these rich countries that we trade with. I agree with all that. But when you say we're going to remove 25% of the funding, 25% of what number? Because the 25% number could be applied to any number. And then you're stuck with maybe an increase in foreign aid, right? And that's not breaking a promise. I said 25% less of this number, and we all agree that this number is foreign aid, blah, 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 blah. I've been burned too many times to look at somebody promising a percentage decrease and say, oh, that's great. Because my question is, off what? 25% off what number? Off what number are we agreed upon that you're going to cut 25% off and then never go above in your 4 years, right? Because that's the point to me. And a lot of times it's like, oh, well, we know better and we can't tell you why. Well, frustrating. Okay, so here's the article from the Toronto Sun. Canadian taxpayers sent $7.1 million to China in foreign aid last year. The Trudeau Liberals also sent $5 million to North Korea, $4 million to Iran, and even Putin's Russia got $200,000. None of those countries are democratic, all are run by dictators, and none have values in line with Canada. So Why are we funding them? For that matter, why are we funding countries like Italy? Yes, we are giving foreign aid money to a wealthy member of the European Union. Under a plan announced by Conservative leader Andrew Scheer on Tuesday, that kind of foreign aid would be cut. Scheer promised a 25% cut to foreign aid that would see high-income countries and dictatorships get the boot. Quote, Canadians now can see the choice between sending more of their hard-earned tax dollars to countries that rank relatively high on the development index. Countries like Italy, like Brazil, like Turkey, and hostile governments like Iran, Scheer said. If you find it hard to believe that we are funding some of these countries, here are the numbers from the government's own figures from last year. Mexico, 6.8 million. Turkey, 4.5 million. Brazil, 4.3 million. And Argentina, 2.1 million. Why on earth would Canada fund any of these countries with foreign aid money? They are wealthy trading partners, not countries with the basic needs of their citizens not being met. Scheer's plan was denounced by Liberal leader Justin Trudeau as not doing enough for climate change. I'm not sure what giving millions to rich countries like Italy and Mexico, or dictatorships like China and Iran, has to do with climate change. Other countries said if Scheer wins and implements his plan, Canada will lose out on a shot at a seat on the United Nations Security Council. I happen to think that Trudeau starting fights with Saudi Arabia and embarrassing us in India would have pretty much lost us the seat. Wearing blackface likely cost Canada a bunch of votes from African countries. Still, Scheer answered questions on that and didn't shy away from saying the UN is not his priority. Quote, it's more important to me that I help Canadians get ahead than curry favor at the United Nations, Scheer insisted. Okay, so this is a break from what he's previously said, and this is one of the reasons why I'm highlighting this story, because previously, up until like when this story was published, which was, I believe, this morning, yesterday morning. Up till that point, Mr. Scheer had said that he would pursue the same Security Council seat that Mr. Trudeau was pursuing. So this is making news. This is a break from his traditional or what he has been campaigning on. And I don't know why. There's no, as far as, I don't know why he would change his position that much, but it's interesting to note. Okay, here we go, back to the article. Hearing that someone aspiring to be our PM is more interested in Canadians than the United Nations will leave many Liberal supporters horrified. Some people in this country still have a rose-colored glasses view of an organization that gives as much weight, sometimes more, to dictators and despots as it does to democratically elected leaders. China, Pakistan, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia are all current members of the United Nations Human Rights Council. All of them are serial human rights abusers. This is the organization that Trudeau has put most of Canada's support behind since becoming Prime Minister. Justin Trudeau has spent the last 4 years humiliating himself and all Canadians on the world stage with his weak, unprincipled leadership, Scheer said. We can't laugh at the costumes in India, and we can laugh at the costumes in India, and we can wince at his statements on the world stage, but Trudeau's actions have real-world consequences. What Scheer is proposing is sensible. Most Canadians don't object to foreign aid in principle if it's going to help people in need. What they worry about is money being squandered or going to countries that don't need it or that keep the funding for those at the top while letting those at the bottom suffer. This idea will be attacked by those that think we need to fund all countries and all programs, but when confronted by that, just ask them if they would want to live under the mullahs in Tehran. Their answer will tell you everything. Right, and I think that it's interesting just noting if we'd cut... Well, I mean, any one of these. Guelph got $1.4 million for homelessness over 4 years. And, well, why are we sending all of this money to big, successful economies and not keeping it running in our economy? I don't understand. It doesn't make obvious sense to me, and it doesn't make obvious sense to Mr. Lilly either. So, quite interesting stuff. Here's the Globe and Mail on business, and it says, average Canadian household spent more on taxes than living costs in 2018, report finds. And, well, here we go. The average Canadian household paid nearly $40,000 in taxes last year, more than the combined cost of clothing, food, and shelter, according to a new report. The Fraser Institute's annual Canadian Consumer Tax Index is meant to show how the tax bill has changed over time. Last year's average tax burden of $39,299 is almost 3 times what Canadians paid in 1961 after adjusting for inflation, and has risen much faster than the cost of necessities, including housing, the Institute said. The authors calculated that the typical household spent just more than $32,000 on clothing, food, and shelter in 2018. Quote, whether you look over a couple of generations, we've significantly expanded the scope of government. Finn Poshman, resident scholar at the Fraser Institute, said in an interview, if we want to continue supporting the scope of government that we do, we should remind ourselves just what the cost is. As a proportion of average cash income, the tax rate climbed from 33.5% in 1961 to 40.8% in 1981 to 44.2% last year, the Institute calculated. Since the early 1980s, overall rates have remained relatively stable, ranging from 41 to 47%. The majority expansion of government was between 1960 and the 1980s, and it has so far proved durable, Mr. Poshman said. The growth in household taxes, however, has supported the establishment of programs that most Canadians would consider essential, said David MacDonald, senior economist with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. In 1961, we didn't have national Medicare. We didn't have a Canadian pension plan, Mr. MacDonald said. Taxes pay for something. Other estimates of Canadian household tax rates are lower than the Fraser Institute's. In 2017, the Broadbent Institute calculated the typical Canadian family faces an effective tax rate of around 24%. A key difference in methodology is that the Fraser Institute includes a number of taxes not paid directly by Canadian individuals, but that are paid by businesses and may be buried in the costs of goods. Payroll deductions paid by employers, for example, make up a portion of Fraser Institute's family tax bill. The Fraser Institute's number also include taxes paid by Canadian corporations on business profits, a total of $4,726 per family. Mr. Poshman argues that the cost of corporate taxes are ultimately borne by employees and consumers through lower wages and higher prices. Businesses don't pay taxes, people do. That's well founded in economic literature and tax theory, he said. The report does not apportion Canadian families a share of corporate profits. The report also draws attention to the gap between what Canadians pay in taxes and what they spend on essentials, including shelter, food, and clothing, which accounts for 36.3% of income. Taxes, not life's basic necessities, remain the largest household expense for families across the country, the Fraser Institute news release said. But as economies develop, the share of income taken up by spending on necessities tends to decline. I suspect it's not uncommon among Western welfare state countries, Mr. Poshman said. We're not big outliers. We're neither an extremely high tax country and we're not a low tax country either. So that's very interesting with regards to the upcoming election. We spend more on taxes, but do you feel like you get value back? And I'll reference this previous story to put context to that, right? Do you feel like we're getting value with hallway healthcare and foreign aid being top priorities for our governments? The last story today is an RBC report reported by Bill Tufts, and he says, well, he's talking about how the immigration is impacting rent in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, and you can see how much rent is across the different, like a 3-bedroom is gold, 2-bedroom is blue, bachelor is the dark blue, and the gray is 1-bedroom. And the average rents across Canada, Vancouver, a bachelor is $1,150, whereas in Montreal it's $641. Toronto, a bachelor is $1,080. 2-bedroom is $1,633, whereas in Vancouver, a 2-bedroom is $1,921. And the important parts of the report are here highlighted. It says, will new rental supply be sufficient to fill the gaps? To restore equilibrium over, say, a 2-year time frame, we estimate Toronto's rental stock must be expanded by 53,500 new rental units, the size of the deficit plus 2 years' worth of demand growth, or an average of 26,800 units per year. The equivalent annual number is 11,600 in Montreal. So what it's saying is, in order to keep pace with the demand of housing, we need to build at least 53,500 new units over 2 years, or 26,800 for 1 year, and that's not on pace to have that much inventory available. And so what does that do to the price of rent and the price of single-family homes, etc.? Well, it increases it, right? Supply and demand, simple economics. When the supply, the inventory is low, the demand is high because, yes, there's increasing people. You get high rent, an increasing rent. And it says here, high Toronto construction levels aren't enough. In the Toronto area, the purpose-built rental apartment complex surged over the past 12 months to a quarter-century high of 4,300 units. That good news, but constitutes less than 20% of the required increase in the rental stock. An additional 7,900 rental units potentially came from newly completed condos, based on 50% of those units being put in the rental pool by investors. Yet this still left total newly built units representing less than half of the rental stock expansion needed. Less than half. And here's the whole report, and I just wanted to show you. Here's what I was just reading from, right? So will the rental supply be sufficient to fill the gaps? What is necessary is a government willing to look at the root of the problem, and that is the point, right? You can't solve a problem especially when there's no way to build your way out of it. There's no way. There's no way. It's not fast enough. It's unbelievable. So, well, lots going on in Canada, lots going on across different markets, lots going on in the taxes. And I mean, we get to make a decision in less than 3 weeks. So make sure you get out to vote. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Voting day is October 21st. Almost forgot. Thanks for watching.